Hi, I'm Steve. Welcome to my shop. Today I'm going to start a new video series on building this hexagonal table. This table was inspired by a Yeung Chan design. It's built of Honduras mahogany, sapele, and Macquarie veneer. So let's just get to part one, and I hope you enjoy. Thanks for watching. Here I'm using the slider and the Fritz and Franz jig to rip the lower leg portions to width. Here I'm ripping the lower stretchers to width. You want these as close as possible to the final dimension. In my case, I chose 30 millimeters, something easily divisible by 3, whatever measurement systems you prefer. Here I'm using a modified version of the Fritz and Franz jig. It is set up to cut the 3-way crosslap joints for the upper and lower stretchers. I do recommend having a sample piece of your cut such that you can reference, because in my case I actually needed an extra piece for the upper stretchers because I made the wrong cut once. I will provide separate videos on the build of this jig and also how to use this jig. If you do not have a sliding table saw, a similar jig could be made with a single runner in a cabinet saw. The cuts that are being made are either 2/3 of the way through the width of the material or 1/3 of the way through the width of the material. Here I'm cleaning out the waste with a hand chisel and a mallet, and then I'm putting that to final finish with the router plane, and this is my assembly. You want this tight. If there's any looseness at all, your legs will wobble on the table. Don't worry about the typical space necessary for glue. I did end up gluing it. I'm not sure it was really required because it becomes self-locking once that table gets assembled. Now I'm pulling the unit apart.
Break this apart.
Blue tape is just to mark the reference faces for the jig.
Let's cut some tenons.
And now I'm cutting the tenons on the end. This is the Lee FMT jig if you're interested. Now I'm using the same jig to cut the mortises in the leg. Now I'm cutting the bevel on the top of the leg. The angle I used was 26 degrees. Now I'm cutting the mortise in the top of the leg where the bevel was just cut. And now I'm cutting the tenon on the stub piece that goes at the top of the leg. I doubled up the length on that, and I actually cut tenons on each end and then ended up cutting the piece in half and gluing it to the top of the legs. There's a lot of material being removed on this one with that spiral upcut bit. So I'm checking to make sure I got it all before I pull it out of the jig. Now I'm using the bandsaw to rough shape the arc on the inside of the stub piece at the top of the leg. And then I'll take it over to the disc sander to touch it up and clean it up. Just light touches on that 80 grit paper is all that's necessary. Here what I'm looking for is the intersection between the arc and the inside of the face of the leg. Here I'm trimming the leg to 10 millimeters longer than what my final length will be. Once I'm done with that, this is going to a jig and over to the shaper where I'm cutting a thumbnail profile on the outside of the leg. If there's enough interest, I can make a video on the details of this jig and my clamping system in it. It was pretty tough getting around that inside arc because I did not consider the bearing diameter as opposed to just the shaper diameter. So it was a challenge. It was too tight. I would make that a little larger radius next time. Here I'm using the router, using a 1-inch core box bit to cut some piece of the bottom leg. After trimming it to length and width, I'm gluing it in place and just clamping it with a spring clamp. Once that's all cleaned up, I'm going to use a gouge to fair that curve into the back of the leg. And now I'm doing the final shaping on the bottom of the leg. I've used a marking gauge to to mark some reference lines at the bottom, and I'm just using eye and feel to make sure I got a smooth curve. I'm using a spoke shave to knock the sharp corners off the bottom of the leg. Now comes the dry assembly. Here I had just a bit of a tight fit on that upper tenon, so I took some 120 grit stick-on paper on a little cutoff and just touch it up. It doesn't take much to make that joint just perfect. And now once this is done, I'll stop the video at this point and we'll continue with part 2 in the next video.